Are you a scaling SaaS founder?
Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those who don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where we step into the new year not just with New Year's resolutions, but with a renewed spirit of joy, collaboration, and endless possibilities. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you scale from 7 figures, which is good, to 8 and 9 figures, which is outstanding. Together, we supercharge revenue growth, create premium valuation, and craft the business you're proud of and a life of impact and freedom that you love. Welcome to 2024. It's our first episode of the year. Forget the cliches about New Year's resolutions that fizzle out by February. And instead, let's talk about the new year in a different way. One that's less about flipping a calendar page and more about understanding the rhythm of time and our place in that time. So many of you know I'm a musician, and rhythm is a very important part of music. In a band, that's how we all stay together and in sync. Without that, the greatest musicians would just be uncoordinated noise, like a band of raccoons in a trash can symphony. And as a business leader, you have much more in common with musicians in a band than you might think. As the new year unfolds, think about yourself as a songwriter, maybe a composer. Each of us has a blank sheet of music in front of us, and the question isn't what resolutions we should scribble down quickly because we're supposed to have a plan, right? But it's really about what melodies and harmonies do we want to weave throughout the year. It's about setting an intention, a theme, if you will, that guides our decisions, our actions, and interactions. Now, over the holidays, my brother-in-law was talking about Duolingo. He's learning Spanish. Pretty cool. Yeah, I've tried it and a dozen other ways to learn several different languages. And learning a language takes time. It takes discipline. And lots of the ways out there are not very fun or engaging. Old school, a long time ago, you used to go sit in class. Anyone ever learn another language in high school? And can you still speak that today? Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? You go through and you may take 1, 2, 3 years of a language, and then a little while later, it's like I have no idea what any of that stuff is. And when we aren't consistent, progress just evaporates. Duolingo has turned language learning into a daily habit for millions. They didn't just build an app. They created a daily practice habit, made it fun, gamified the process, and transformed language learning not into just like a New Year's resolution, but a sustainable part of people's lives. It's why it works. Success isn't about hitting January goals. It's about integrating into the daily rhythms of users year round. So it's taking those habits, if you've read Atomic Habits, it's that habit stacking. It's taking something that you're already doing and building into that. So how can we do the same thing inside of our companies? We walk our SaaS companies through a process that's transformed my business and life starting about 10 years ago. And since then, I've refined that process every single year, and we've continued to iterate on that. And here's the core of it. At the beginning of the year, instead of resolutions, what we want to do is first, we want to set a theme, not just goals. Instead of a list of resolutions, ideas, goals, or maybe wishes, consider setting a theme for the year. Maybe it's growth. Maybe it's balance, innovation. One of our companies last year set a theme of fun. We can't grind all the time, right? But does that mean that we just sit still or stagnate? And with the theme of fun? No, they grew 130% last year with a theme of fun. But whatever you choose, let the theme be your guide, influencing your choices and priorities, giving your actions depth and direction. We use an agile methodology and work in very specific projects that move the needle in conjunction with your theme. And I think that's pretty awesome. Second, we want to embrace the power of rituals. Think about the small daily rituals that can lead to big changes over time. Kind of like Duolingo's daily lessons. What small actions can you incorporate into your routine that align with your theme and build towards your vision? I talked about this in December. The mark of a champion is consistency. Sometimes one step seems so insignificant, boring, mundane, but string together a couple thousand and you've traveled a mile. Cash flow follows calendar. So schedule those consistent steps. Get them on there. Take those steps day after day after day. Be consistent. And third, we want to celebrate the continuum. The new year isn't a stark break from the past, but a continuation of what you're already doing. So we want to keep some things, we want to do some new things, and we want to get rid of some old things that didn't work. So reflect on the lessons from the previous year and consider how they inform your journey forward. What do you want to keep? What do you want to get rid of? What do you want to add? This isn't about abrupt change. I have a picture and I'll show it to you if you're watching the podcast. It's a trail that we hiked in Zion National Park, and it's going up the side of a mountain, back and forth and back and forth. And every step was, just a step, and whatever it is, 18, 20, 30 inches forward. It's like, how far am I going? It's just a step. But consistency paid off. We made it to the top and well beyond. And I love the idea that this picture conveys of looking back at the trail and seeing all those switchbacks going up the mountain. We can see that progress. And I think it's important that we look at that. We look at the progress behind and the road ahead. And so it's like looking back, you're like, wow, we did that. And now you're looking ahead and saying, now let's go do this. So here's to a year of meaningful themes, daily rituals, and continuous evolution. So make 2024 not just another loop around the sun, but a deliberate, beautiful composition of our time, talents, and aspirations. Cheers to the new year. A year like no other, 2024. So what are some themes that you are thinking about or maybe kicking around this year for 2024? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you could use a little encouragement on your SaaS journey from fellow B2B SaaS founders, check out Champion Leadership Group. It is the ultimate resource for SaaS founders and C-suite executives to continue to develop themselves, scale their companies, and never walk alone on the journey. We are kicking off a new growth accelerator scale up this month, and I would love for you to be a part of it. You've navigated the startup storms and emerged victorious. Now it is time to elevate from success to significance. Our executive navigation program is the tailored B2B SaaS accelerator for companies aiming to move from at least $1 million ARR to 10 to 20 and more. No fluff, just the hard-hitting strategies you need at the right time. We focus on capital-efficient growth, profitability that lasts, and achieving the kind of valuation that's not just impressive, but impactful. You'll gain access to a network of peers, growth plans, and the kind of operational excellence that frees you to focus on what really matters. Plus, enjoy the success that you've built. It's time to step beyond the daily grind to lead with vision and live in freedom. So if you're ready to not just lead your industry, but to redefine your market, visit championleadership.com. That's where leaders evolve and companies transform. And apply to join the next cohort. Now is the time to scale up. championleadership.com. Our expert last week was LaShawn Smith, founder and investor at Kager Investments. He shares his journey from software titan at Amazon and Microsoft to a master of business innovation, deploying $450 million in R&D and shaping tech for industry heavyweights. We did a deep dive into his unique blend of AI expertise, growth tactics, and entrepreneurial wisdom. And then a week ago, right after Christmas, the team flipped the script, took over the podcast, and grilled me. It's a lot of fun. Ski goggles, reindeer antlers. You got to check out that YouTube video. And 2 decades of business building lessons, some screw ups, and some tips along the way. These 2 episodes were a great way to cap off 2023. So if you missed either one of those, go grab them, download them. Hey, maybe even on your drive home. My guest today is Alan Smith, VP of Venture Development at FutureSight Ventures. Over the last 12 years, Alan created and sold $130 million products and services, built teams to 100 people, and sold 3 million books. It's pretty cool. He and his team at Strategyzer created one of the world's most popular business systems while having a ton of fun. Those things are not mutually exclusive. His journey made him a believer that the basics done wrong kill potential, and he's right on that. And done right unlock success. Absolutely correct. Welcome our first guest of 2024, Alan Smith. Hey, Alan, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff.
Tell me a little bit about your background as a founder through Strategyzer and now your time at FutureSight Ventures.
So I come from a design and marketing background. I didn't go to business school, probably like a lot of SaaS founders here. I've also created a lot of SaaS products that didn't make it. So those are, you hear about Strategyzer and the work we're doing at FutureSight Ventures. But as far as creating products goes, I've been interested in creating digital products since my first company, which was actually an agency, and we were building digital products back then. And this was before, I didn't even know what SaaS was because I was a designer, right? I knew how to build product, but I didn't know how to build a business that would support the product, essentially, right? I couldn't wrap a business engine around an idea to help the idea go out there and live on its own. And I was screwing that up for a few years, just eating all the profits from my agency, trying to create new stuff that I was excited about. And after a while, I was like, I got to do something about this. And so that was when I got connected with what later became the team, at Strategizer. Our first project was the book Business Model Generation, where that was my first chance to learn about business models and to spend some time really sinking into the content. I don't know if you've heard this, but if you really want to learn something, they say, teach a course, write a book, or start a business. And I totally agree with that. It's if anything you want to learn, that's probably one of the best ways to do it. Although I would caveat, you can also add to, write a book, create a Twitter account or, a pseudonym that only is a subject matter expert in that, right? I guess I come from this sort of design product background and then got into Strategyzer. First, we started with IP, started with ideas. And then we created software, this workflow software to help people execute against those ideas. We built an LMS. We didn't need to. So it's classic engineer, designer, early SaaS founder mistake. We'll build it rather than, just buy it. Had a great product coach. He told me not to do it. I did it anyway. So just sort of did all the working with the devs to get it leadership and what it means to help other people figure out how to do things rather than figuring out how to do them on my own.
That's fantastic. And I love that the journey, agency and then, books and training and software and then, productized services. So it's really kind of gone full circle back to services, but this time more, productizing the services, which I think is a brilliant concept.
Yeah. And, with Strategyzer, what we're really trying to do is to democratize strategy, make it easier for people to figure out some of these core fundamental questions. What's your business model? What's your value proposition? How do you know that you're right? Because those could be scary things. And if you get them wrong, or if you're talking about it and there's something that you assume is there between you and any of your collaborators, that can be a killer. These things have huge leverage, right? This is when you're walking and that whole 1 degree off at the beginning of a journey means you end up completely, somewhere else, right? So these are massive leverage topics. And then, taking that through to FutureSight, what we're doing there with the fund is to take some of those ideas in a more applied setting as an institutional co-founder and create a platform for entrepreneurs to build, hopefully impactful B2B SaaS businesses in way less time and for hopefully less money and a lot less pain than I've seen in the past on my own and with others.
I love that you said, somebody told you not to build the LMS and you did it anyway. And, I've been down that same road. I mean, you ask a developer, should we buy, should we build? And 100% of the time, my experience is the answer is, oh, we should build it ourselves.
Yeah, totally.
And
there's a lot of good reasons, right? And you listen to the reasons and it all makes sense, as a founder.
Of course it does.
Actually, nobody's going to have the exact requirements that we want. No, of course they're not. Once we get it up and running, it'll be cheaper. Maybe, but probably not. And it's never actually going to get up and running, right? The core concept here to remember is any business that's doing this is amortizing the cost of that product across many customers. And if you're one customer, you're just dividing by 1 rather than dividing by 100. So how is it going to be as cheap? It's just never possible. And they're getting the learnings from all of those pieces of the market and probably only focused on that one thing rather than that one thing plus the other thing that you're probably doing. So yeah, that was a hard lesson. But sometimes you need to make these mistakes.
That's a big one, because it also, I think the biggest challenge is it takes away from the core product that you should be building, your core business, instead of, chasing all these side projects and the shiny objects.
In my first business, there's a great diagram for this, and it's, imagine a circle with, a kind of like inch long arrow in 6 directions, or 15 directions, even better, right? Like, chasing after a lot of shiny objects. So you have 15 little arrows, and then you've got covered about this much space outside of the circle. Whereas if you said, okay, well, take that same circle, and now you've got a 15-inch, sort of line in one direction, and you've made that much progress, right? That's what the difference is between trying to, fight all the battles. And there's only so much gas in the tank. There's only so much energy. There's only so much time in the day. And you have to really choose your battles. And my first company, we made this mistake too, of trying to innovate on everything. Because you could look at, I think any creative entrepreneur could look at anything and say, I can do that better. Yeah. I know a better way, right? Like I've got an idea for that. And I can't accept this because, and therefore I must. And the cost of saying yes to all of those battles is not really being able to win any of them, and potentially failing the most important one, which is, what is the core business? What's the main problem you're trying to solve for your customers, right? And if you don't have enough energy behind that, how are you supposed to compete with somebody who just puts a little bit more towards that and fights a few less battles?
Well, we definitely made those mistakes. What are some other mistakes that you made in the early days?
Well, like apart from the basic stuff, like everybody gets their timelines wrong, right? Like you assume that this could work and, it work within X period of time. I think everybody, at the beginning kind of experiments with waterfall of saying, hey, like we're going to come up with this big vision and then break it down into pieces and then build the first piece and then build the second piece and build the third piece, creating too big of a vision and then trying to build the whole thing. That's a really, really common mistake I see with a lot of founders. Trying to solve 2 problems or 3 or 4. Yeah. And so assuming that, here's what our customers need. They need this end-to-end solution. Maybe they do. And it's going to be really difficult for you to be able to build that entire thing from scratch. What's the one problem you can solve for them now without having to build this massive product to be able to, get it off the ground and up and running? And, I think that's another one. So logical extensions of a roadmap that have not been validated by a customer. And, I had
that one hurts a little bit.
Right. It hurts at all. Because you look at the roadmap and you're like, okay, well, where's this going and what's next? And it's easy to come up with features to sort of like add on to. Let's say you did the first thing right. You solved one problem. And now you start thinking about, okay, now we can do this. Now we can do this. Now we can do this. Here's 5 features that make this better or could also. That can be so deceiving. Like we can look at that and think, perfect. And you can sit in a room with a bunch of super smart people, like the smartest people and you could all say, yeah, this looks really good. And if nobody's, has the humility to say, have we checked this with the customer yet? Maybe these are all their problems, but are they their next most important problems? That can lead to really expensive development that doesn't really go anywhere. That's a big one. Oh man, other mistakes. Okay. So like apart from the whole dev thing, right? Like you can hire the wrong devs, really easily and, start adding more and more layers of complexity to your stack because developers want to have fun with more parts of the stack, right? Like, hey, there's this new, protocol or there's this, new thing that we want to play with. It's the best. The old ones aren't going to be any good. Okay, makes sense. We should be working with that. And then you hear the same story in 3 months. You hear the same story in 3 months. You hear the same story another 3 months later. So adding way too much to the tech stack and making the tech stack complicated, not paying down technical debt and like managing technical debt. Obviously that's huge. I've screwed that up. Dude, how long do you want me to keep going? That's some of them. Let's leave it there for now, unless something else jumps out at me. I'm like, even just thinking back, and it's like a little bit painful. But
Yeah.
so one more I'll share is, I think
Sure.
sometimes promoting from within to a leadership position. So taking someone from the team who's a great team member, and the company's growing, and they really want to do this thing that's a couple of levels up from where they are. Them, they're a known quantity. It's easier to hire somebody else who's kind of at their level than it is to go out and find that, higher level that they're getting promoted to. Maybe you can save some money, by promoting them rather than hiring someone externally. And I would say like 4 times out of 5, that hasn't worked out for me. That's another one I'd look out for.
That's really hard, especially the dollars. When you start looking at that, well, I can promote them and just give them a little bump, but if I go out, it's going to be 50% more to find that next level of talent.
And
but
then when you think about the cost,
it doesn't work.
You get it wrong 6 months later. This whole area is still broken. There's a great book by Randy Street and Jeff Smart called "Who: The A Method for Hiring," and in it they cover this idea that a bad hire is something like 11 times the cost of the hire, like the hard cost of whatever you spent. So,
wow,
I
believe it.
It could be for multiple reasons, right? It could be the opportunity cost. Like the whole business can easily get slowed down if that person becomes a bottleneck and doesn't fulfill their goals, right? And then you're a year out saying, wow, that was a big mistake.
Well, it's easy to think about mistakes, but it's not all mistakes because you've done well. I mean, you sold products, $130 million in the last 12 years. That's pretty good. 3 million books. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, but proud of that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do the successes look like? What are the key elements that led to that success?
The times when we spent the time up front talking to a customer and making sure that they needed what we were making, like that product was high enough on their list that it was going to get done. That basically they were ready to buy on that day almost, that we started talking to them about the problem. Those feel like the ones that ended up as a win. Like when the customer was like, oh, I don't have anyone else, or like, if you could do this, I'm in today. If I could sign a letter of intent with them to buy, if they would sign it, that's a great signal. We use that, now at FutureSight. I think the other successes are the ones where you create something that in your heart, as you're building it, you start to get excited. So this is an and, right? This isn't an or. But like as you're building it, every time you come to a meeting and it's progressed a little bit, or every time you're sitting down, if you're like more of an individual contributor on it, you're getting stoked about this is going to be so good when it's done. Almost every time I've got that feeling, like while working on something, it's worked out. I love that feeling. And, when the whole team is sort of like, grinding away at it and like excited about that vision, and you can get everyone excited about that vision. And there's this moment of like, I think we could do this. This is going to be awesome. It's just over the horizon. We've still got a long way to go. That's one of those like really great moments in work on its own. Like even if it didn't work out, it's just like a good way to spend your time. You know what I mean? Whether or not it results in something that people actually want to buy, but more often than not, it feels like it does. And then the ones that had the right go-to-market, like go-to-market is so much. And, without a line to the customer who the product is supposed to help, it might as well be locked in a bank vault somewhere, right? It doesn't do much good. So those are some of the things that I think jump out. And the other ones I would say is, trusting people who are supposed to be doing their piece of the puzzle as much as possible. It's easy to, as a leader, to try to jump in and add too much value and to say, well, I think it should be like this, or I think it should be like that. And accepting that it'll be different no matter what. And hopefully if you hire the right person, it's going to be better. It would never be the same way you're going to make it. And if it's the right person, it's going to be better than the way you would have made it.
That's hard to process as a leader, is I'm going to let this go. I'm going to give it to somebody else and it's going to be better. And we're expecting them to just take it and make it our way. But they don't. They do it their way. And a lot of times it is better. And even if it's, starts out at 80 or 90%, that's still a win. And then it grows from there and does get better.
Yeah. What's the quote? 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome, right? That's
Right.
skills.
Well, the entrepreneurial journey, I mean, with a lot of ups and downs for sure. And, so how have you processed? I mean, because it feels different at different stages. When things are really going, I mean, it feels great. When you make a mistake and you realize it, or, you see a downward trend or something doesn't work and you don't feel so good. How have you managed that, and how has mindset played a role in your success?
One of the things that's been really helpful for me, just starting, from a support perspective, is having a forum group. And so I've been part of a forum for 10 years. And a few people have come and gone. And a few people have been there with me for 10 years. And, we meet once a month for 4 hours. And when I think about it, it's like I spent 400 hours, with this group talking about business.
That's awesome.
And, what's working and what's not. And I also have a record of my thoughts. And so when I go back and I look at that, I see exactly what you're saying. This month I'm scoring business, 9 out of 10. 2 months ago, I'm scoring it, 3 out of 10. 2 months before that, I'm 8.5 out of 10. Right. And so there's like the ups
Right.
and downs. It's almost ridiculous. Like I look back at if you've written it down and you can follow it, the ups and downs, it's almost comical. It's like from zooming out, if you just sort of zoom out from that and realize that, it's all peaks and valleys. And actually there's a great book on this called Peaks and Valleys. And part of the mindset there that I find really helpful is the things you do in the valleys are the things that get you back to the peaks, right? It's when you're feeling 3 out of 10 and that everything's terrible. It's the decisions you make on that day, in that week, in that month that drive you back up to the peak. And conversely, and kind of like equally painful, is the decisions you make at the top of the peak that help define the next trough. How deep is it going to be, and how quickly can you get out of it?
Yeah.
How many resources did you sort of save? How careful were you about planning for contingencies versus just riding high, on the good days? This idea of the peaks and valleys, I think is really important. Anybody who doesn't have a meditation practice, that's kind of like an easy no-brainer. As far as which ones worked for me, that's kind of more details than we're really looking for. But I love the presence process. And so I can't meditate all the time, but I can do it for 3 months in a row every day. And then I can take a break for 3 months. And that seems to have worked for me in terms of helping to cultivate, a mindset of presence, and that this is all okay. It's not happening to me. It's happening for me. Right. And the last thing I'll share on this that I think is so compelling. And actually, this was shared at an event that we were at recently. Every problem you face in entrepreneurship is facing something inside of yourself that needs work, right? And it's an opportunity to level up yourself. And so by taking a moment to see each challenge as a gift, and that, you might not get it this time, but you'll get it next time. Lessons are repeated until learned. And when I look back and I'm like, I made that same mistake, 4 times before I stopped making that same mistake. Yeah. It's like, well, I wasn't ready to learn. Clearly, I just didn't get it. And so, I need to be taught a few times. The lessons come back to you, and accepting that every time you're freaking out about the world, just not going your way, remember that it is exactly what you need in that moment. And that's not what we want to hear in that moment, but that's, now it's easier. Right.
Yeah, it's easy. Sometimes those repeated mistakes, it's somebody else's fault until I do it 3 or 4 times in a row, and then realize that the one common denominator every time this bad thing happens is sitting right here. It's the problem's in the mirror.
I was at I did this retreat, and we did a sweat lodge thing, and at the end of it, there was this elder there, this super wise elder, and I was asking him. Because at the time I was thinking about the right environment makes a big difference. And if I just change my environment, we react to change. If you put out your shoes, the night before, you're more likely to go running. Or if you put a bunch of bad food on your plate, you're likely to eat a plate of bad food because it's on your plate. Right. There's you keep chips in the house, chips are going to get eaten, stuff like this. And so those are bad examples. I'm talking more, from a almost spiritual self-growth type setting. I was, and, larger life context. I was asking him, should I be organizing my environment or changing my interior? And this elder sort of like crosses his arms and he sits back and he like leans back and he says, wherever you go, there you are. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, problems in the mirror. There's another great phrase, which is, if I'm not the problem, there is no solution, which is taking that to its absolute extreme, right?
Yeah.
But like you can only solve what you can solve. But to me, this stuff is new to my journey. Like I'm just starting to put together some of these pieces now. And, earlier on in my journey, none of this stuff made any sense. It was all tactical, right? And then maybe if I could have a moment to just get my head above water, I could start to find a little bit of strategy, here and there. It's hard and it takes time, and the lessons come slowly,
Yeah, they do. So that's really, really good just to think about it that way and process. And if we're not the problem, then or there is no problem, that there is no solution. And so really figuring out what is that I can change, as that's really the one thing that we control is ourselves and our attitude and our mindset. I mean, we can change that. There's a lot of external factors that we really have very little control over.
And to build on that, of what we can control, you can't always change everything, and you can't change everything about a business very quickly. So there's a lot of things that cannot be changed, and a lot of things, that cannot be changed quickly. There's this idea that if you can't change the experience, you can change your quality of the experience, how you're experiencing something. And so how are you letting something make you feel? There's no frustrating people. There's only you getting frustrated, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I think really putting yourself at the center of this is both personal accountability is probably like one of the biggest ideas. And I think we all have it at some level, and we find it. A lot of it gets covered up. And for me, for many years, it was covered up. It was somebody else's problem, or I was waiting on somebody else to solve it, or it was the world and it wasn't, it was like kind of like victim mindset, right? I don't want to blame victims there, because there's lots of true victimization. And there's this idea that we can take that on when we don't need to. And there's an alternative in many situations as far as a mindset goes. Yeah, it's hard to put a bow on that one. There's a lot there, to kind of unpack.
Well, it's a lot easier to work on the environment because it's out there, and we can. It's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, But when you're working on the environment instead of actually working on the root problem of this is something we got to fix, or we're going down.
Yeah, the symptoms. Not causes, right? It's so easy to chase symptoms and chase symptoms and chase symptoms. And where are the causes? And in anything, what's the cause of the problem that we're solving today? And actually, kind of two sneaky meeting questions. If we want to just dive back down to the tactical level after getting, fairly philosophical there for a minute, Jeff,
sure.
Is I find so often people lose track of the problem they're trying to solve, and just asking in a meeting, what problem are we solving here? And reminding people, what problem are we solving here? And then, before people get way too far with trying to solve the problem, ask, what is the cause of this problem? And why is that happening? Right. And that can help people, especially a team, if I'm assuming, most of the listeners from, what I know of the listeners of SaaS Fuel are leading teams. And this is one of the, if people aren't working on the right thing, what are they working on? Right? You got to be working on the right thing. The next right thing, as we know, is so powerful.
Yeah.
And getting them focused on the next right thing, it can be as easy as pulling them away from you're working on this symptom to this problem, to you're working on this root cause to that problem, and the other 5 ones you were going to have to solve otherwise. Right?
Well, in addition to work, you're not all work, you're fun as well. And so, there's always an element of freedom and fun in what you do. How does that fit into work? And is it something that you have to wait until, you exit and sell and, somewhere later, or is it something you do along the way? Do you build that into your journey?
The obvious answer here is, every day, right? You asked about the exit, right? a friend of mine, he had a really interesting situation where he was exiting his business. He had to sell. He was on track. Everything was going great. And then the deal fell apart. And by the time the deal fell apart, he was cooked. He had no energy left. He had to go to the investors and say, I have to walk away. We'll hire a new CEO, but I'm kind of out. He stepped back to support his mental health. And he's a huge proponent of mental health for entrepreneurs now as well. But essentially, he had the experience of not achieving the exit that he'd been working for 7 years, on the business.
Mm.
Then, out of the blue, luckily enough, another strategic came along, kind of picked up the deal on most of the work that had already been done. And, 6 weeks later, it was sold. And he had the experience of both. And he said to me, everything you're ever going to get from this business, you get on the days that you're doing the work, right?
Yeah.
You don't get it at the end. There's no finish line that's that exciting because that stuff doesn't matter. And you know what? When it's somebody with, 8-figure checking account telling you that, that's different than when it's somebody who actually had the experience of both. He had both experiences. And he made up his mind, and he sort of took in that learning after, first not getting the sale and then getting the sale. And so to me, that says that every day should be a day where, celebrate the win, which is getting to do the work you want to do. And if, like Steve Jobs said, if you wake up in the mirror too many days in a row and this isn't something you want to do, go do something else. It's okay, right? This is a big part of it. And when you're doing the right work, with the right people, I feel like the fun just starts to be there. Like it's just naturally there. You just get excited about what you're working on. And, you don't have to take yourself so seriously. At the end of the day, we're all building sandcastles, man. Like this stuff doesn't last, one of the reasons why I love, out of all the different types of products, I've built and sold, books are so compelling because they last longer than anything else. So many digital products I've made that don't seem that old, there's like barely a trace of them. They're like a whisper in the wind,
Yeah.
And those books, they're going to be there till the end of time. Like it's just like they're printed. They can sit on the shelf. They are reprinted, consistently. You put something on Amazon KDP, it's going to be there forever, and it won't be there forever. There's all of this stuff. Like, no matter what we're doing, we can't take ourselves too seriously.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, you don't take it with you, and none of it lasts that long anyway.
I think that's really good advice. That's my experience as well. It's those mountaintop, the peak experiences, they come and go. And those peaks, they don't last that long. It's like, yay, an exit. And then, a week later, a month later, 2 months, a year. It's like, well, big deal. But the thing that does last is it's those people that are with you on the journey. It's the relationships that you build. And those things are so much more valuable than getting a one-time check because you did something cool once.
Totally. I just got a message today from a couple of old team members of mine, and they're all meeting up together in Thailand right now. And just seeing like the three of them in a picture, none of them work at the same companies, anymore. And including myself, like none of us work together anymore. And just seeing them together, I was like, that's awesome. Right? Like, there's something so great about that.
Yeah.
And you know what I don't like about this, Jeff, is it seems so obvious and it also seems boring. Like it's uninteresting. Like there's no framework for this. It's not like there's nothing to teach, here. It's so simple. And these simple lessons, I struggle with them sometimes because they're too simple, right? Like something that's too simple can't seem true. Like we crave complexity. We crave making things more complicated than they need to be because it seems like, well, that's, how great stuff must have it. For some reason, we have this mental construct that it's got to be complicated or it's got to be hard. And that, this whole thing is a glass eating competition where, we have to grind it out every day. Or, we need to put together these super elaborate, solutions to stuff, or look for these, the solution to my happiness is a 10-year build of a company so that I can sell it and then be happy. It's like, well,
Right.
there's probably a better way. And it's probably
Right.
simpler than the 10 years worth of, activities that you had lined up to solve that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. When would now be a good time to be happy?
Yeah. When would now, right?
Yeah.
There's on that topic, since we're just very philosophical today, Jeff, is when has anything ever happened to you in the future or the past? Never, right? It
Right.
only happens.
Right.
Now. All we have is now. The future is a made up construct in our minds of, something that we think is maybe going to happen or maybe not, or we're entertaining, for a moment. And the past is the same. It's a rehashing of something that did happen, at one point in time.
Right. Right.
And therefore, nothing actually happened to us in the past. It only happened in the moment of now, which you either missed because you were worried about the past and like holding on to some sort of regrets, or you thinking way too much about the future and that, moment way far off, or that problem from tomorrow and bringing tomorrow's problem into today at the expense of being able to actually live the moment, be present, and give the best that you could give, right? All great performance comes from focus. This is more of an American thing, and I'm Canadian, right? So, but who's that football team? They're really famous. The story of that high school football team that they never lost a game for years or something. And the coach, the way he coached them was really specific. All we focus on is this play. We don't worry about the second half. We don't worry about the next quarter. We don't worry about the next play. All we worry about is this one. That's what we're completely focused on. And they brought down their amount of focus and presence to such a small space that the amount of energy that they were able to put into that space was unmatchable. And therefore they built up this incredible track record, right? There's there's a powerful message, in there for all of us. And it's a simple one too.
Yeah. I like that. Wherever you are, be there.
Yeah.
Be in the moment. Be focused on what's going on.
And
it's
again, really such a trite and almost patronizing message that has so much truth. Because it's so simple. It feels patronizing, right? It can't be that simple. It's got to be harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's bring it back up to wrap things up. Tell me about what you're doing today at FutureSight Ventures.
Starting a company is really hard, right? Starting a SaaS is really tough. We're trying to take luck out of the equation. And that's a big part of what I was doing, at Strategizer, and what we're doing with the team is trying to make tools to make the whole process of going through a business a little bit more repeatable, starting, a business or finding a new opportunity, or at least starting a new product, even finding a way to make that less risky and make it more repeatable. And that, the lean startup, Eric Ries, Steve Blank, all of this stuff was done for a reason, which was how do we reduce the chances of failure? Because the chances of failure are so high in this game. And so there's a whole ecosystem that I didn't really know a lot about previously. But coming to it, the venture studio model is a little bit different than the accelerator or the incubator or a tech transfer, all these other sort of models for early stage. The venture studio model has this really interesting concept of almost like getting a co-founder who is not just a good developer or not just a good marketer, or not just a good pick one of the many skills you're going to need with you along the journey, and especially in the early stages, let's say, first 18 months, 2 years. The idea of being able to have a technical or a co-founder who's an institutional co-founder, where you kind of co-found with a bunch of people who actually just know how to do the early stages of a business really well and run that playbook constantly. In the same way, you hire a leadership team to grow a company and sort of extend your reach. The FutureSight team or a venture studio team does the same thing at the early stages, where they've got the list of skills required to maximize chances of success at that point in time. And so that looks like a couple of things. It looks like a stable of ideas for when one doesn't work out. What else could we potentially do in this space? There's a focus on, some sort of a thesis that if you buy into that thesis, That's cool. I think that those ideas are more likely to win. And, at the end of the day, the whole venture studio bet is really this. Take a thought experiment. You've got 100 founders in a room, all getting ready to do their next thing. Half of them, you give them, a bunch of money, let's say $1 million, right? And then you say, good luck, come back to me when you've turned it into 10. And then the other group, you give them $500,000 and you give them this team. And the team has the playbook and the team keeps the entrepreneur on track and sort of channels their genius. And if you are an investor, out of these 50 and these 50, which are more likely, to succeed? The venture studio bet is it's the group with less money and more support because the money's been spent in the right place to some extent already. And that they've got an external, sort of from day one, an external piece of accountability to keep them on track, and a sparring partner. That's the whole idea. And so, at FutureSight, we're building B2B SaaS businesses. We aim at the mid-market. That's what we're capitalized for. It's tough to build B2C. You need a little bit more money than what we spend. It can be challenging to go to the enterprise in early stages. You need a little bit more money than what we have or what we invest, like, our price point in terms of the type of businesses that we build and the timeline. We just try to compress the timeline as much as possible. So it's the venture studio, man. And, it's awesome to run this team and to be executing on a lot of the ideas that we were working on at arm's length with Strategyzer, both teaching the IP, running a coaching program, having internal, building internal incubators at Fortune 100s and managing billion-dollar innovation funds. Super proud of all that work, and being able to have this institutional co-founding team with really inspired, values-driven entrepreneurs is super exciting. So yeah, that's what we're doing now, and it's been a ride so far.
Yeah, I love the model and just positioning, meet your co-founding team, and just that concept is so refreshing. It's way different than what you see in most other companies. Venture studios, I think, relatively new concept. And I think that is absolutely brilliant what you're doing there, and your focus on vertical SaaS.
Vertical is also easier for a lot of reasons. I shouldn't say it's easier. There's things you can do when you go vertical that simplify things. And, just to give you an example, even with Strategyzer, we're making very horizontal business tools. Like anybody, it didn't matter if you run a flower shop or a consultancy or multinational auto manufacturer or a wind farm, or it doesn't matter. You just keep going, right? All of those tools were designed to work in any one of those contexts, which is really tough to do. And you have to think about all of those different customers and all of their different problems. And does this work in all those contexts? So you have to leave stuff out that don't work for some to be able to make it work for everyone.
Right.
In the vertical model, basically you've got a very small group of people, right? And that very small group of people who can really listen to their problems. You understand where they are, you understand their context really clearly, and you can build the best possible solution for them. Not something that needs to work with a lot of people. And that's what I think is beautiful about the vertical model of being able to go deep and really have a strong impact on a smaller group of people. Still trying to build $100 million businesses. That's, the cutoff. That's where we're aiming. But there's something different about the super, the hyper verticalized model, which again, the last thing I'll share is it feels, or on this, niching down feels like trite advice again. This feels to me like one of those things where everybody just says it, niche down, niche down, niche down. And, as Strategyzer, I always said why, right? I don't want to. I would rather we build something for more people to solve, help more people, right? But more people need help. But I want more units of impact per, of effort that I put in. So no, we're not going to niche down. It was only once we started to niche down that we really started to find more success. And so it's one of those lessons that I feel like at some point you just need to make the mistake And if you're still making that mistake of going super horizontal and it's not working out, or assuming that something's for everybody, or assuming that it's for 5 different people, when really it's mostly for one of them, and being afraid to say no to the other 4, and just sell to the one, it's courageous. And it feels like it goes against something in most entrepreneurs and most even sales and marketing people, but that message on its own of just niche down. And so we build really vertical SaaS. It's a big part of what we do. Yeah.
I think it's a smart business.
Thank you, sir. It's an exciting one.
Yeah. Very focused. Well, where can people learn more about you and about FutureSight Ventures online?
Yeah. Come find us at FutureSight.Ventures. We got a blog there that we write about sometimes. We got a bit of a social media presence that's growing up a little bit. It's a young business, but we're off to a really fun start. There's a wonderful team there that has a lot of heart and integrity, and that's what I love about this. Back to your point of a big part of this is about the people. Who do you work with? And we want to work with values-driven people, which is why we chose to work with values-driven people in our inner circle. And then once we add the founders, and FutureSight.Ventures, check us out there. My name is Fink Smith on most of the social media channels. Although I don't post a ton. Usually, I like to share like this, and I like to share, through my one-on-one work and work with the teams. So this is the main places you can find me.
Very good. We'll make sure and link all of that in the show notes. So, Alan, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Thanks for being on SaaS Fuel.
Hey, I hope it wasn't way too existential and advicey for your listeners. It was fun to talk about this stuff and to get there.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
See you, Jeff.
Thanks again, Alan, for coming on the show and sharing your journey, foresight, and resources, or maybe I should say FutureSight. I really love the model that FutureSight Ventures has, because it's not just dumb money. And dumb money is not what you want. You can find that anywhere, but definitely not what you want. You can learn more about Alan at FutureSight.Ventures, and be sure and check him out on social as well. All links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at SaaSfuel.com. And of course, check out our YouTube channel as well. Full episode shorts, outtakes, training, and quite a bit more for you, awesome SaaS founders. Please do take a minute and help out a fellow SaaS founder and share the podcast. They will see you as even more of a thought leader when you do. And everyone who shares this week gets a regrettable resolutions recycler. Made a vow to jog every morning, but hit snooze instead? Just feed it into the recycler and get a more manageable, slightly less ambitious resolution in return. Or just skip that whole thing and let's create awesome results together. Be sure and check out our new accelerator cohort, championleadership.com. Join us Thursday on our SaaS Fuel Expert Series, where my guest is Ollie Wood, founder of The Body Reset. Ollie will give us the straight scoop on fitness and teach us how to run our bodies like a business. It is great, great stuff. Ollie's a cool dude too. And then next Tuesday, we have Andrea Walls, co-founder of Courage Crafters and best-selling author of Go for No. Revolutionizes rejection in sales and business, teaching a counterintuitive strategy. And she'll bring that to us next Thursday. Andrea will show us how to transform a no from a setback to a pathway to success. Pretty cool stuff. Unlock next level sales in your SaaS right here in 2024. So I will see you next time. And as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at SaaSfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.